Very good morning, everybody. We are live from Johannesburg. It's our first real cold day this winter, it feels like, guys.
Well, you know what? We didn't really have a winter. And today it feels like winter, I can tell you that much. 13 degrees, they say, Kendall.
Yeah, it's a cold snap sweeping through the land. It will be over soon. Don't despair. Summer is around the corner.
Yeah, let's hope that you are warm and comfortable wherever you are. Of course, we'll look back today on yesterday and the last 5 years. Marikana, that infamous incident on the Koppie there. A Wonderkop is what they called it. So we're asking our question because we're also running an entire show discussion first up around Marikana today.
And we're asking the question, what lessons do you think should be learned from the Marikana killings that we've seen there, the tragedy that struck Marikana? So let's take a look, Kendall, what they are telling us.
Maxit comes in with, we're allowed to be divided, taught to hate each other while we're busy fighting. They're busy looting, and that's why Africa is so poor, yet very rich.
Maxit, on point. Kudani Mashanyu says to us, the lesson is that no life should be taken for granted. I think nobody deserves death from protest. Alas, we wish to return to the apartheid days.
Well, those are some of your comments on the Marikana issue. Big day yesterday, of course, but today we also focus on Zimbabwe's High Commission. Now, they have sent a request to the Department of International Relations here in South Africa to invoke diplomatic immunity for the First Lady Grace Mugabe after the assault case, of course.
It's the biggest talking point and biggest story in South Africa this week. Now, a lot of you have heard what's been going on with regards to this. Kendall, when she came to South Africa, the tweets that were read out said that she's coming here for medical attention.
Absolutely. In fact, right now what we've got on our screen is on the 12th of August 2017, the ZANU-PF website, the official ZANU-PF website, very first paragraph says, and quotes President Mugabe saying, the First Lady has come to South Africa, is coming to South Africa to have her foot examined after injuring it at the airport in a freak accident recently.
Interesting. So, we're asking you guys, should Grace Mugabe be granted diplomatic immunity? We want you to vote on it. It's not the view of the SABC or of Newsroom. This is what you think. Elvis, what do they say? Well,
86% of them are saying no. Grace Mugabe should not be granted diplomatic immunity. Now, that's a big number. Only 15% of all the Zimbabweans living in South Africa are saying yes.
And I think it needs to be said, we've already got, it's only been a few minutes that this poll has been up and already 316 votes in.
It shows you the level of interest that South Africans are having with the story. I think some people feel it's a sort of an assault on our integrity and on our sovereignty a little bit, Elvis.
To a great degree, and on top of that, the First Lady is also buying a 45 million rand mansion, we are told.
Oh, wonderful. Michael, the Big M, says, let's have a look what says Michael Kendall.
He says, no, she shouldn't get immunity. But under our laws, she qualifies for one Diplomatic Immunities and Privileges Amendment Bill of 2001, plus the AU policy on diplomatic immunity.
Michael, that is only if you are in South Africa on official business.
Official business, we might add, is very important. That means she was not here for government business. Dipanso says she must face the consequences. She's not the president yet.
Well, keep tweeting us, guys. It's going to be a talking point, I think, for the next couple of days. The SADC heads of state meetings are underway, and of course we've heard now that it's been put forward. But we're asking a question because Barcelona got another hiding last night, and all over Europe we're seeing the end of an era. Is it the end of an era? Is it the end of Leo Messi? Are Barcelona under the pump? What do you think about the question, Kendall?
Well, that's just it. You know, it's one of those, like, nobody would have thought that Real Madrid over 2 legs would thrash Barcelona 5-1. The space of 7 days, Barcelona 5-1 to Real Madrid. Is it really the end of an era? And we've got quite a lot of comments on this.
Not Marvin Gaye says, no, not really. They are just 2-3 signings away from being great again. This is how we began the season. We won the treble. Well, so says not Marvin
Yes,
Gaye.
but we had a very different coach and it was a very different environment.
Yep, Gudani tweets, he says, the time has come to take a back seat and reevaluate their goals and strategies to achieve them. This era is done, he says, yes, and that's what they're reporting in Madrid today. The new era of Real Madrid has started. Interesting, we love football here in South Africa, and we're going to keep you, well, we're going to talk about this rivalry and, of course, Leo Messi and the Ronaldo factor and how it's going to play out over the over the coming season.
And how losing Neymar might have affected Barcelona.
Oh, yes, massive effect. Anyhow, we'll talk about all that a little bit later, myself and Kendall. Don't worry, don't miss that. But Elvis, we've got a big job ahead of us. Lots of news.
Let's get down to business. Infrastructure development among BRICS countries is expected to be at the center of the African Regional Center of the new development bank to be launched today. The question over whether Zimbabwe's First Lady Grace Mugabe can or cannot invoke diplomatic immunity over an assault case continues unabated. And it's day 2 of the battle between the 5 ANC branches in KwaZulu-Natal and the party's provincial leadership at the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Now, those are your headlines, but before we get there, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports field.
Yeah, no, it's a cold day, but there's quite a lot happening on the sports field. Quite a lot of heated debates and discussions happening around what's going on with one of the biggest teams in the world, Barcelona.
Yeah.
And I think there's quite a lot to talk about later.
A lot to talk about. Also the box. They're heading into this weekend under the radar a little bit. I see they've got some issues in the front row, and I think Alistair Coetzee, this will be his acid test this weekend.
Absolutely, and I think Saru are depending on this series to make sure we get that 2023 Rugby World Cup bid. Promise you, it's all important. All the dots get joined later on. All of this coming up later, but this is what we've got planned for you now.
A lot of people wrote us off after the Sharks loss in Durban. The guys really came back, beating Western Province on the Wednesday and beating the Cheetahs then on the Saturday.
The domestic rugby season is in full swing, and the Griquas are intent on making it 3 wins on the trot when they take on the Pumas at home this weekend.
We are now preparing for the second leg. We are going to Zambia. We have to go and work hard for another 90 minutes.
Thabo Senong will be taking over from Stuart Baxter for Bafana's second leg tie. Chan qualify against Zambia in Ndola.
Marcelo pulls it back. Benzema!
Real Madrid destroy Barcelona 5-1 over 2 legs to take the Super Cup, extending Zinedine Zidane's extraordinary run at the helm of Los Blancos. All this in more detail a little later. Do stay with Elvis, as he's definitely got the news for you.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma will preside over the launch of the African Regional Center of the new development bank in Johannesburg today. Also known as the BRICS Bank, it mobilizes resources for infrastructure and development projects in BRICS countries. The new bank has a starting capital of $100 billion. Our SABC reporter Devin Murigan spoke with the bank's president, Kundapur Kamath, ahead of the launch. Now, he began by asking him how the NDP can justify issuing Eskom a $180 million loan in foreign currency. But we'll come back to that story in a short while. Meanwhile, the Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, says that the launch of the regional office of the National Development Bank is a big and proud moment for South Africa. The minister says that the benefits of the bank, among others, include less stringent conditionalities when borrowing money. SABC News spoke to the minister, Malusi Gigaba, earlier.
So the core mandate of the bank at the present moment is to become a multilateral international financial institution for BRICS member countries. As I say, over time, we will open up membership to other countries, not only from Africa and Latin America or Asia, but also even from Europe. If there are countries that are interested in joining the bank from Europe and elsewhere. But we are yet to agree on the principles upon which such membership will be open to other countries, because there are dynamics. We formed the bank for particular reasons. We were looking at how do you create a balance, a multipolarity in the international financial mechanism. And we established the bank in order to provide that counterweight, particularly in favor of developing countries, trying to give them a bigger voice. BRICS members are a significant voice within the G20. We are, and the G20 is constitutes about 90% of the membership of the IMF and the World Bank, and so we are a significant voice in this regard. I think the establishment of BRICS itself, now the launch of the BRICS, of the new development bank, otherwise known as the BRICS Bank, provides us that level of leverage, not only politically but also economically in global affairs, and so it is an important institution.
Institution indeed, because the President, Jacob Zuma, will preside over the launch of the African Regional Center for the new development bank here in Johannesburg today. It is also known as the BRICS Bank, and it mobilizes resources for infrastructure and development projects in all the BRICS countries. The new bank has got a starting capital of $100 billion. Now, let's go to our SABC reporter, Devin Murugan, who spoke with the bank's president a little bit earlier ahead of the launch. He began by asking him if the NDB can justify issuing Eskom a $180 million loan in foreign currency.
From 2 years back today, every single leader of the BRICS countries and the finance ministers talk of local currency, exactly in the context you did. So our plan now is renminbi for sure. India, there's a masala bond market, and we will access the offshore masala bond market in the next, in the latter part of this year. My earlier trip to South Africa, I sounded pension funds here in particular. I wasn't sure that there would be appetite, but there was for paper issued by an NDB. So I asked them, why will there be an appetite? They said, basically, we want to diversify risk. So long story short, China, India, South Africa, and a month back I was in Russia. Again, the same feeling that come and access our markets. I think this whole momentum toward de-risking our countries from externalities, I think is gathering great, pace. And we will certainly be looking at how we could lend in local currencies, a significant part of our lending program. Because honestly, as you say, there is no point in leaving residual risk on the currency to people who will follow us in the future.
We'll follow up on this story a little bit later. Now, the acting National Police Commissioner, Lesetja Motiba, has confirmed that Zimbabwe's First Lady, Grace Mugabe, has sought diplomatic immunity in South Africa. The South African Police Ministry released a statement confirming that the wife of the 93-year-old Zimbabwean President, Robert Mugabe, remains in South Africa. Now, this is despite reports that she had returned home after failing to turn herself in to face charges of assault. However, it is not clear what grounds the Zimbabwean First Lady would be seeking diplomatic immunity for. Earlier this week, the country's ruling ZANU-PF party released a statement saying the following, and I quote, President Mugabe says that the First Lady, Dr. Grace Mugabe, has traveled to South Africa to have a foot examined after she was injured at an airport in a freak accident recently. Well, there you have it, and that's why we're asking you this question. Should the First Lady be granted diplomatic immunity? 85% of you on that, to 364 votes that are in, are saying no, she should not be granted diplomatic immunity. You're also telling us the following. Ruvembo says swift justice is required more than anything else. Renaissance Dialogue says, Newsroom, the assault to women is way too much in South Africa. This is even worse, committed by a high-profile person, #Grace Mugabe, and she must be punished. And this one from Clive Patterson says, she must be declared persona non grata and be deported. Those are all your comments. Please keep coming. We'll read them as we continue. But big story, the battle between the legal minds representing 5 ANC members in KwaZulu-Natal and the party's provincial leadership continues at the Pietermaritzburg High Court today. The case is on its second day and is being heard by a full bench. 5 ANC branch leaders have taken the party to court, challenging the legitimacy of the 2015 KwaZulu-Natal ANC elective conference. To recap what transpired on the first day, we are joined by our SABC reporters Blaine Herman and Ayanda Mshlongo. Very good morning to you and welcome, Blaine. What is going on there this morning and what implications could the case have on the South African political landscape?
Yeah, very good morning to you, Albus. Day 2 of this most intriguing court case playing itself out here in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. It was a pretty busy day yesterday, inside as well as outside of court. Outside, in fact, we saw energetic supporters of both sides of the case showing their support. They were stationed about 100 meters away from each other. And what was interesting to note that both sides actually took turns, seemingly took turns, marching up the same stretch of road just outside the court, peacefully, I might add. So full-throated singing was heard till the late afternoon. So definitely energetic, spirited supporters from both sides of the case right here at the Pietermaritzburg High Court. That's what happened outside. Inside, well, the respondents as well as the applicants via their counsels laid out their case. Very interesting points, salient points was put to the full bench here at the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Our colleague Ayana Mhlongo was following these proceedings very closely. She joins me now live. Ayana, a very good morning to you once again. Just take us through this interesting day, day one, a very important day in this case. What stood out for you?
Interesting day indeed, Blaine, with both the counsels for the applicants and the respondents making their submissions yesterday. But the Pietermaritzburg High Court hearing yesterday, one of the points made by the applicants to their counsel, advocate Tembega Ugaitoy, speaking about the timing of the applicant filing this court case. You know that the 2015 conference, which is what has brought this matter here to a court, was, according to the case of the applicant, was supposed to have in fact have been held in 2016. It was held 6 months before it should have been held. A premature conference is what the applicants are saying, and he's saying that them bringing the case to court was not because they delayed, was because they were trying to follow the avenues within their party, raising their concerns at the provincial level. When they failed, they then took their complaints to as far up as the NEC, written letters to the SG. But we also heard that they even met with President Jacob Zuma in December in 2015, and the President had promised that he would then respond to the complaints from the branches, failing that he didn't. And they then, when they did not get a response from President Jacob Zuma, they then wrote to the SG, and again they didn't get a response. And they said that they'd exhausted all channels within their party, as the ANC says that they want people who have grievances or complaints to raise them internally. And they're saying that they've done that, and as a result, then they had no choice but to then approach the courts. The other matter, Blaine, that was raised was the conference having been called before its time. That the PEC that approved that conference to have go ahead, the applicants are saying they had no authority to do that. For a conference to have been held earlier, they would have required a third of the branches to have given the approval for the PEC to then hold that conference. They are saying that the conference went ahead with only an approval by the NEC, and it wasn't a written approval, and that they did not allow for the third of the branches here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal to give that approval for the conference to be held.
5 applicants, 39 respondents, strong support, I guess, for both sides. What was the mood like inside court? And we spoke about outside, where the supporters were stationed about 100 meters apart from each other. Very peaceful, marching through the same stretch of roads. But take us inside. What was the mood like inside?
Well, we've seen how important this case is, Blaine, and thus you've seen even yesterday when we saw the leadership of the ANC, the PEC, in fact, the whole top 5 of the PEC, they were here yesterday together with other members of the PEC who are the respondents in this case. We've also seen other leaders of the ANC from across the province of KwaZulu-Natal also coming through. Of course, on the side of the applicants, all 5 of the applicants are all here. They also have support. There are leaders, also other leaders within the ANC who are supporting the applicants, the branches court case. They were also out here in their numbers. But I must say, Blaine, what they've shown, and this is what they were saying, and trying to send this message to their supporters that they are not enemies. And we could see that during the break. We could see that how they were interacting with one another inside the court during the breaks. When we came out as well, they were all chatting and laughing away, showing that as they are still very much all committed, loyal members of the ANC, that this is not necessarily a case against the ANC, but they're here just on a procedural matter, that the only issue that the one side has, and that is the applicants, is that they are saying that there were irregularities when it came to the holding of that 2015 elective conference. And this is what they want to try and show to their supporters outside as well, that if the leaders can come together, if they can laugh, if they can talk amongst themselves, then that should be example to their supporters as well. And you remember that it was, I beg your pardon, Stembiso Mshengu, who was speaking on behalf of the applicants, making that plea a day before the case was supposed to be heard, urging the supporters to be tolerant of one another, and saying that there's not a war, and that they need to respect, and that they are here, and that their behavior needs to reflect an ANC culture.
Yeah, I think he said that they're not enemies, rather that they just disagree on certain issues. Busy day today, day 2, important day. Take us through what we can expect.
Yeah, another busy day, of course, today, Blaine. Yesterday we ended with the submissions that were being made by the counsel for the respondents, Advocate Greg Harper. He will then continue with his submissions today, and then what we might see, and we heard this from one of the counsels for the applicants, to say that we might see them wrapping up today. It's not 100%, but we'll then have to wait and see whether or not there is going to be further submissions, which will be made by the respondents, and then we'll have to, the judges will then decide when closing arguments will then be heard.
Okay, we'll look forward to your reporting later on. Ian and Mplongo, thank you very much indeed for your time. So a possibility of wrapping up today, but we'll still have to confirm that. We'll listen to proceedings as the day goes on. Outside here, well, currently the music is on. It's a very cold and rainy day in Pietermaritzburg, so we'll see how that affects the crowd turnout here in terms of their supporters coming out for this case. But we'll keep you updated with all the latest from Pietermaritzburg High Court, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let me throw it back to Elvis.
Thank you so much, Blaine. That was Blaine Herman, our SABC reporter, as well as Ayanda Mhlongo, giving us the latest from the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Very important day yesterday. It was Marikana, 5 years since that massacre, and we're asking you this question. We'd like to find out from you, what do you make of this? What lessons should be learned from the Marikana killings? That's the question. Please let us know on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. For more, let's go over to Eben to start that conversation.
Yeah, Elvis, of course, we saw the commemorations yesterday. For those of you, if you've just joined us, it's 5 years since the Marikana massacre, and some say the bitter taste of loss still lingers among those who remain. Thousands of mine workers and political leaders gathered at the infamous Koppie Wonderkop in Marikana in the northwest to honor the 34 Lonmin mine workers who were killed on this day in 2012. With no arrests and no compensation in sight for surviving families, it seems justice remains evasive.
A day that shook the world. 34 miners gunned down by police and scores others injured following a confrontation with police in what many have described as a massacre in post-democratic South Africa. And 5 years on, the wounds of August 12, 2012 are far from healed. He says they are here to fight for what their late brothers fought for. All they want is change. He says it's bittersweet because they died, but they still didn't get what they wanted. He says they are not free here in South Africa. They didn't get what they wanted from Lonmin, but at least AMCU made a difference. While a fund has been set up to assist surviving families, government was lambasted for failing to compensate them.
There has been no justice in Marikana in the past 5 years. It's a disgrace that we are talking about 5 years, and yet not a single cent has been paid in compensation to our people.
Arrests have been made in connection with the killings that preceded the massacre, but no police officer has been held accountable for the deaths.
16 August must be like June 16, because there is nothing different between June 16 and Sharpeville Day and Marikana Day.
They will never put a compensation fund because they will admit that they killed our people today. Until these dictators are gone.
Half a decade since the tragedy, AMCU President Joseph Mathunjwa has called for the legacy of the Marikana 34 to inspire change.
5 years later, our communities still suffer without proper housing and proper basic services. There is still a lot to be done, comrades. The journey may be long, comrades, with many, many challenges to be overcome. However, nothing will deter us.
The surviving families and widows of the deceased also attended the commemorations. Simple English, SABC News, Marikana.
5 years on, but not a single prosecution. The Farlam Commission exonerated key political figures fingered in the events leading up to this massacre. But despite the Commission's recommendations, the implicated police officers are yet to face the music.
Since reminiscent of the dark days of apartheid, the Marikana Commission of Inquiry, led by Judge Ian Farlam, exonerated political figures. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, then non-executive at London, reportedly pressured former Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa and then Mineral Resources Minister Susan Chabangu to end the strike. The Commission found that given some deaths had already occurred, his intervention did not influence police, nor did he know the operation would take place on 16th August. There was no evidence linking Ramaphosa to the murder of minors. Mthethwa and Chabangu were also exonerated. The Tlasin Commission found then Police Commissioner Ria Pierre unfit to hold office. Judge Farlam recommended the NPA investigate the killings, the conduct of the police, as well as Lonmin's failure to protect minors.
The Farlam Commission will not be the last word on what happened here. The truth is going to come. We are still going to overturn that commission, and the reality of what happened here is going to come out.
The NPA referred the queries to the Minister of Justice. His office would not comment. Poko, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Yeah, of course, we've been asking you the question today. What are the lessons that we've learned 5 years on from the Marikana massacre on that fateful day, 16th of August, that happened on the Wonderkop there outside the mining community of Marikana. Here are some of your tweets with regards to it. Maxit tweets us and says, poverty still the highest in Northwest, the richest in the country with minerals that makes the same people overseas sit comfortable in their homes. Jamila van der Skyf tweets us, there is no justice in South Africa. Innocent people lost their lives and those police officers who killed them are not given a warning. This one from Katlejo, who tells us cops, violence, guns, axe, sticks, pangas, swords don't solve problems. Negotiate, engage, talk. Mines generate money and people and should pay people and not exploit them. Those are your views on the Marikana massacre. Now, Labour Union AMCU, they are going to take this matter to the International Labour Court. That's with the United Nations. I'll speak to the International Labour Organization after the break. Now, Johnny Musabanyana is in our studios in the capital. But before we go and talk to that, let's just do a bit of housekeeping. After the break, I'll talk to him about that action that is about to follow. First, these are the stories on social media. Cold front, that's the hashtag. Can you feel that icy wind this morning? Yeah, it's certainly cutting through all of us here on the Highveld. That's because a cold front has just made landfall. Yeah, just in time for the weekend. So brace yourselves for what's going to be a very chilly weekend. Then thousands gathered at the Marikana Kopi in the northwest to honor those who were tragically killed there. In 2012, the hashtag is Marikana. The big story on social media, as you can see from the levels of interest, of course, the hashtag Grace Mugabe. She's asked for diplomatic immunity now after she allegedly assaulted a young woman in a luxury hotel where her sons were staying here in Johannesburg. According to the Department of International Relations, she cannot get diplomatic immunity if she was not here on official business. Now, according to a ZANU-PF statement, she was here to receive treatment for a foot injury. Of course, that happened at the airport some weeks ago. Then, charismatic Pastor Mboro has refuted claims that he wants to kill the CRL Rights Commission chairperson, Tokumkwanazi Kaluva. The two have engaged on quite an exchange thus far, leading to Kaluva increasing her security. Moving further into the African continent, cleanup operations are now underway in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown, after devastating floods and a mudslide killed around 400 people already. Mess barrels are taking place there. It's believed that a further 600 people are still missing. President Ernest Bai Koroma has called for urgent support and has declared 7 days of mourning in the country. In some other news, yesterday, well, it marked the death of the great music legend Elvis Presley, who died 40 years ago yesterday. Some die-hard fans visited his gravesite and home to relive a moment in his space and time. Graceland, Elvis Presley, the king. Now, let's take a look at our picture of the day. This one comes from Tumi at Boy2K, and it's captioned, "The Taxi Strike." Now, if you're in the capital, you would have known all about this. Now, he says with this pictures, "Taxi drivers are not special. We all have to pay our tickets to renew our licenses. Learn to abide by the rules." Now, let's talk to our tweet of the day. This comment comes from Jay Konjane, who says to us, "Taxi drivers striking for traffic fines. This is a joke, right? So they see nothing wrong with what they do on the road. Hashtag taxi strike. We all have to abide by the rules of the road and the rules of the country." That is an issue that is in sharp focus in South Africa this week. Nobody should be above the law. Now, let's go to the courts where the laws are issued. We start in Johannesburg. The Constitutional Court is expected to hear the case of the MEC for Health and Social Development of the Gauteng government and a mother, Dumile Judith Zulu, who is suing the department for the payment of damages after her daughter, Wandile Zulu, suffered brain damage at the time of her birth because of staff negligence at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital. Then, in Pretoria, where the trial of the plant continues, expert witness Professor David Nutt is expected to continue testifying in the High Court. There yesterday, he testified that making dagga accessible to children would destroy them. However, he argued that there was nothing wrong with legalizing dagga for adults. The trial continues. We'll give you periodic updates as matters break there. Those are the court cases on today. Just to tell you quickly what's happening tomorrow. Now, tomorrow, well, we'll explore the ANC's proposed plan to take action against members who voted in agreement with the opposition in last week's much vaunted motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma. That, of course, happened in Parliament, and there are many calls for action to be taken. We'll talk to various sides of the argument about what is to follow. That's on the show tomorrow. We're going to take a little break now. When I come back, I'll be talking to the International Labour Organization about UNCA's plan to take the Marikana matter to the UN's Labour Court. Don't miss that.
Rights and recourse tackles constitutional issues.
When South Africa became a constitutional democracy, we had a fairly sound legal system in place requiring the Constitution to guide the direction in which it must go and the way in which it must be refashioned.
The Justice Ministry, the custodian of human rights.
We actually have a plan to come up with a comprehensive review of our human rights instruments.
Advocates dealing with evidence.
Sometimes you have to use a crook to catch a crook. So we expected that the credibility would really be taken to task. you try and consult your witnesses and prepare them as best as you can.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Mates on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
Welcome back and good morning if you've just joined us. Now, the 16th of August 2012, the Marikana incident has been singled out as the most lethal use of force by South African security forces against civilians since 1960. What started as a wildcat strike at a mine owned by Lonmin in Marikana, close to Rustenburg in 2012, culminated in the killing of 34 miners. After 5 years, Labour Union AMCU is not satisfied with the progress made so far and want to take the matter to the United Nations International Labour Court. The Director of International Labour Organization in South Africa, the ILO, Dr. Johnny Musabayana, joins us from our Pretoria studios to take this matter forward. Dr. Johnny, thanks for being with us. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Albie. How are you and your listeners?
Just give us a quick idea. What is the ILO's, South Africa's reaction to AMCU taking this step to take the investigation into the Marikana massacre to the International Labour Court of the United Nations?
Let me start by thanking you for the opportunity. Let me highlight that the International Labour Organization, that word court you use there is not the court. It's an international labor organization, and it has mechanisms for reviewing the application of international labor standards in law and in practice in all the member states, of which South Africa is. What this entails, therefore, is that any aggrieved member in the labor market in a member state, indeed like AMCU, is free to approach the ILO to seek recourse on whether particular incidents comply with international labor standards or not, as they are domesticated into South African national law. So they are free to apply, they are free to be heard, and they will be heard if they should do so. But this is not a court. It will be a tripartite discussion, and what emanates from there are largely recommendations in terms of law and practice. Thank you.
The case that AMCU wants to take to the ILO, can you just talk to the merits of the case? How do you view the case?
Let me say I can't prejudge the case. I can't apply my mind to the merits of the case. We have to see what issues are brought up by the aggrieved party. Allow me just to observe a few issues, therefore. Mine is on the process rather than the merits of the case. They will apply, they will have to outline what their grievances are. They will normally be expected to also outline what has been done in law and in practice since the event. It's 5 years since. What national processes have been undertaken. Allow me to observe that South Africa has the NEDLAC, which is a tripartite negotiating forum, that you have robust labor laws that normally should govern this, and therefore all the issues about dialogue and the law and the application of the national law and the consistency of the national law with the international labor standards, and indeed the events as they've unfolded on that particular occasion will also be looked at. But there will be a process that will then apply itself to the merits of the case itself.
Talk to us about your standpoint with regards to the rights of workers to strike, especially taking into consideration that this was an unprotected strike.
Thank you. I think that is a critical question. So the ILO, through Conventions 87 and 98, stand for the freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining of workers. And I'm happy that South Africa has done its best to enshrine these concepts in the national law. You have, I think, key pieces of legislation, the Labour Relations Act, which protect this right to strike. But there's also due process. There is a manner in which those strikes should be undertaken to ensure that they are protected in terms of the law. Now, to what extent the strike action that was undertaken there was consistent with the law is one of the key issues that will be looked at. The extent to which the due processes were followed will have a large bearing on the outcome of the recommendations that will be made by the International Labour Organization.
let's look forward. How do we as South Africa, and what advice would you as the ILO give the South African labour market to stop this kind of thing in future, to stop violent labour strikes and police involvement in labour matters?
I think this is a critical issue. The intersect between strike action and the security authorities is a matter of tension not only in South Africa, throughout the sub-region. We are busy in Swaziland, we are busy in Zimbabwe, we are currently busy in Botswana with the national labor law to ensure that this interaction at the point of contact between those undertaking their right to strike and the national security authorities is properly managed. This is an area of tension everywhere. But in the South African case, I'm aware that there is already ongoing review of the legislation to ensure that the interaction thereof is tightened. And this indeed is an area that we are assisting the authorities in that regard. And I'm reliably informed it's also an issue that is being discussed at NEDLAC in the context of the Indaba that was chaired by the Deputy President and the decisions thereof.
In conclusion, sir, 5 years on, there's a lot of unhappiness. As the ILO, what do you think are the lessons we should take from the Marikana massacre?
If I would say, I think the first is that the labor law has to be governed by particular rules of engagement. And I think I was looking at one of your Twitter people there who said that guns, sticks, machetes, and violence, they don't resolve the issue. You must engage. And I want to reiterate that point. The ILO stands for social dialogue. Dialogue until we find each other. Strike action must be undertaken in terms of the rules of engagement and must follow due process. I think if we respect dialogue and the mechanisms for undertaking strike action, I think then we will have learned the lessons of Marikana.
Doctor, I thank you very much for joining us today and giving us an insight into this process. That's Dr. Johnny Musabayana who is the director rather of the International Labour Organization here in South Africa, giving us his views on the way forward with regards to this action that AMCU wants to take to the United Nations International Labour Organization, he told us, not court. Let's take a look at what's on our Facebook page right now. Expert witnesses, Professor David Nutt. Well, he will continue testifying in the Dagga case brought by a Johannesburg couple in the Pretoria High Court. And then former Deputy Finance Minister SABC Jonah says government has not put enough emphasis on policy development to tackle youth unemployment. Finally, there's little time for mourning as Sierra Leone rushes to bury its dead. Hundreds of residents queued in Freetown to identify victims of a deadly mudslide amid fears that the decomposing bodies could lead to a further public health emergency. All of those on our Facebook page right now. Of course, we are conducting a poll today and we are asking you, well, should Grace Mugabe be granted diplomatic immunity? It's a story that all of you are interested on social media. 405 votes are in. 84% of you rather are saying, nope, no diplomatic immunity. Let's take a look at your tweets. Proudly Koi says, yes, we cannot deny the fact that she's a First Lady and qualifies. However, she must still be held to account. First Ladies don't qualify automatically. They have to be on official business. Christian Kleinert says, why should South Africans who live in a constitutional democracy suffer elitist, superficial laws like diplomatic immunity? Interesting question, that. Nazim Grootboom tweets us, he says, I really don't think she deserves to be given immunity. I just want to see justice served in this case. Yes, there's a massive view that this is the case. Let's now take a quick look around the front pages from around the globe. We'll start in Australia, where the Daily Telegraph there reports that education bureaucrats tried to sneak safe schools back to New South Wales curriculum despite a ban on the controversial sexual and gender diversity program there. Talking about unsafe schools. It's a problem all over. Then in Florida, the Miami Herald says President Donald Trump has abruptly disbanded two of his White House business councils in the latest fallout from his combative comments on racially charged violence that we saw in Charlottesville, Charlottesville, North Carolina it was. Finally, in Israel, the Jerusalem Post reports that women can be chosen for the highest administrative position in the rabbinical court system. The High Court of Justice ruled yesterday in a historic decision following 7 years of legal battles. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the Marikana massacre.
Hello and a warm welcome to PM News, and we're broadcasting live from Johannesburg.
4 decades later, the family is still seeking closure.
We need the truth, and the truth must be told.
Children often go undiagnosed because they are hidden away. About 1 million people in South Africa live with autism.
Creative recycling at play.
Mosaic has been around forever. I just had to find a new, fresh way to put, and a new spin to put on it. So I decided, why not recycled cans?
Stay tuned to PM News for all your news updates every Saturday and Sunday from 1500 hours.
We continue our focus on Marikana this morning. Now, Amnesty International wants South African authorities to ensure that those suspected of criminal responsibility in relation to the 2012 Marikana killings be brought to trial. The organization also demands that the victims and their families receive reparations, including adequate compensation. After 5 years, no one has been prosecuted for the killing of the 34 striking mine workers and injury to at least 70 others. Now, as you can recall, 10 other people were also killed in the period preceding the tragedy. The Marikana massacre is described as the single most lethal use of force by South African security forces against civilians since 1960. Amnesty International has bemoaned what it says is the lack of prosecutions for the killings. The Executive Director of Amnesty International in South Africa, Shanila Mohammed, joins us now in studio to talk about justice for the Marikana victims. A very good morning to you, Ms. Mohammed, and welcome.
Morning, Elvis.
First and foremostly, as Amnesty, what is your involvement with the victims of the Marikana massacre?
Well, Amnesty International, we're a movement of citizens, of people who take injustice personally, and that is what makes us different from other organizations. So our involvement with the people of Marikana is basically that we are there to support the victim, to support the people to basically fight for their basic rights. And in that sense, since 2012, when the Marikana massacre actually took place, Amnesty has been on the ground. We've been monitoring, we've been talking to the communities, we've been working with the widows who have been affected. But we also recently, in 2015, we produced a report in which we highlighted the fact that Lonmin, the mining company, for whom the miners worked, did not fulfill its social requirements and responsibilities, particularly in the provision of housing, which it was supposed to do. So as you know, that Lonmin was supposed to have, between 2006, according to the agreement between 2006 and 2011, have delivered 5,500 houses. By 2011, it had delivered 3 houses. So, this is what we do. We are also supporting the widows who will be protesting this week in London, at the Lonmin offices, and talking to people about the situation and about what they're facing on the ground. So we are very much involved.
It is 5 years later. No one has been prosecuted as yet. From Amnesty's perspective, will South Africa ever see justice for the victims of the Marikana tragedy?
I think, you know, justice is something that we have to continue to fight for. It's not a question of will, it's a question of it's a reality that we need to make happen as citizens of the world and as citizens of South Africa. I think that, you know, with regards to the Marikana issue, I mean, as we've said, it is unacceptable and unbelievable that 5 years on, nobody has been prosecuted. You know, I was quite interested to see a media report this morning where the National Prosecuting Authority has finally come out and said that they received the dockets from from IPID, and they have sent them back because they were incomplete, and they're hoping to get them on August the 22nd. Well, if that is the case, then let's hope that, you know, once they get the completed dockets, that we will see some movement, because 5 years is too long to wait for justice. And interestingly, with regards to the miners, they were arrested, and, you know, they're facing murder charges. So how come that happened so quickly? And yet the victims of that brutal slaying on that day still wait to see justice.
But who do you think should take full responsibility, and who should be prosecuted?
You know, at the end of the day, the buck ends with the government. You know, at the end of the day, it was the police forces that opened fire on protesters. Yes, Lonman has a role to play in the fact that even the Farlam Commission said that the socioeconomic conditions contributed to what happened. I mean, the protesters would have not gone out looking and demanding a living wage had they been treated fairly with regards to labor issues. So when it comes to responsibility, I think, you know, at the end of the day, the buck ends with the government. The buck ends with the people who lead this country, who gave the decision for live ammunition to be used, who gave the decision for the police to go out and shoot protesting miners. I mean, you know, so really, and what we're seeing is a lack of political will. So there's a lot of rhetoric, anniversaries come and go, people are talking about Marikana again 5 years on because it's the anniversary, but at the end of the day, it's not about commemorations, it's about justice, it's about reparations, it's about giving the victims and the people the hope that what happened to them is being acknowledge, that justice is being served, and that their lives are going to not just sink into some dark corner because nobody cares anymore unless an anniversary comes along.
Now, it seems like you're only concentrating on the 34 miners that died on the day, but what about the 10 preceding the event? Are you concentrating on them as well, or are you assisting the widows?
As far from our side, every single death is a death that should never have happened. So the widows of the police, the police that were killed, the security guards, you know, the people who died before that, all of them are being counted, and it's not as if, you know, as Amnesty, we're just focusing on the 34 miners. What we're saying is that nobody should have died, and, you know, those widows are included in the work that you know, we're doing and we will be doing. From our position, it's not, we're not saying, you know, we're not discriminating between, you know, the different widows. Nobody should have died on that day. Nobody should have died in the week preceding Marikana. So as far as we're concerned, nobody's human rights should have been violated.
Compensation is a very topical issue, and of course there was some sense that government was going to pay the victims. What is happening there?
Well, you know, government has said and continues to say that they will. You know, they've pledged, you know, there's figures being bandied around, 1.7 billion, 1.3 billion. But the bottom line, Elvis, is nobody has seen a cent of it. You know, until that happens, then, you know, we can talk all we like, but it's not about the talk. It's about actually putting it into action. So, you know, if there are some blockages, then remove the blockages, find out what they are, and then pay out the compensation that is being promised all along. Because, you know, where we go to Marikana, in fact, Amnesty people were down there yesterday. The lives of the people there have not improved. People are still living in horrible conditions. So, you know, don't talk. The time for talk is over. We need to now put these things into action.
In 30 seconds, what lessons can we learn from Marikana?
I think the lessons from Marikana are very clear that, you know, first of all, the use of live ammunition on protesters is just not acceptable. People have the right to protest in this country, and that right should be upheld. And yes, protesters should not be brandishing weapons and should not be violent. That's the other side of it. So that's one of the major lessons I feel that needs to be learned.
Thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio. That
Thank you.
was the Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa, Shanila Mohammed. That's, of course, the question we pose to you as well. Let us know what's on your mind. But right now, time for Sports Focus with Evan and Kendall.
Yeah, thanks, Alvis. Very good morning to you. Of course, we're talking El Clásico, Real Madrid, Barcelona. Now, Barcelona humiliated last night, 5-1 over 2 legs for Real Madrid to claim a second trophy in 2 weeks. The question we ask, is this the end of an era for Barcelona, Kendall?
I think it's as an apt question as there could ever be about this rivalry. It's a rivalry for the ages. FCB against Real Madrid, all sorts of nicknames and monikers for both teams. But I tell you what, it seems as if Barcelona were really not there at all over the 2 legs. You and I read an article a little earlier about exactly how little possession Barcelona had in El Clásico. It was actually phenomenal. 2-0 that Real Madrid won last night.
Yeah, it's the first time that Real had more possession than them, I think, in the last 10 or 12 matches,
Absolutely.
which kind of says everything. Let's take a couple of tweets and see what our viewers are saying. The thing, though, is a lot of the flack is being handed out to Leo Messi this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Wandile says Barcelona must get rid of all players because their counterparts had known their style of playing. New blood is needed ASAP. Wandile, everybody's known how Barcelona is going to play for eons.
Villion Mulauti says, no, not yet. It's just the warm-up. The red lights are flashing, my friend.
Yeah, Mara King says Barcelona needs to reinvent its aging squad. There's been less of development by the team.
This one from Not Marvin Gaye says, no, not really. They're just 2 to 3 signings away from being great again. This is how we began the season when we won the treble.
You know, one of the things is quite a lot of good done. It says the time has come to take a backseat and reevaluate Barcelona's goals and strategies to achieve them. This era is done.
Yeah, that's the sentiment in all the websites and front pages around Europe as well, that it's the end of an era. This actually announced in Marca overnight.
Yep.
Front page today says the Real Madrid era gets underway.
You know what? No, and no small measure by Zinedine Zidane and what he's done with Real Madrid. But what I'll tell you this, Josep Bartomeu, the current president of Barcelona, is under a lot of flack for letting Neymar go, for signing Paulinho, who is not the best of signings in this time.
He couldn't make it in England. He's seen as a reject.
So Bartomeu is under a lot of pressure, and I don't see him lasting halfway into the season.
Yeah, that was a great goal by Asensio. A fantastic performance last night. Time for us to take a break. We'll be back with you at the top of the hour with another full update. Don't miss that.
Tahir produced a superb performance with the ball. The Proteas leg spinner put his side in the driving seat, scalping 3 wickets for just 18 runs.
Gifton Gope is flying toward third, and he is there with a triple, his first in the big leagues.
It is a Ferrari front row lockout, unless Hamilton can get on pole, and he can't. Ferrari, for the first time since France in 2008, have locked out the front row.
For all your sports news, keep it locked to Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday from 20:30.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the words of our sacred texts? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Phones, cloud systems and robots have taken over a lot of what used to be done manually.
Our accounting system is actually based on the cloud.
Google nowadays can tell you where you parked your car.
And Africa's entrepreneurs are using technology to create.
With Pocket Masipala, you can basically do all the services that you would do at the municipality physically by going there, but you can now do them on a mobile app.
Join me, Phumelele Zondi, on Sundays at 9 p.m. on SABC News.
Hello again, everybody. I'm with Kendall Mahamati. We'll be with you for the next hour. It's a cold day in Johannesburg.
That it is. I know I've been calling about summer, but you know what? I am feeling the cold as well. I've got a bit of a cough, but I've got a lot to cover today.
Yeah, we've got lots of complaints. Everyone's feeling a little bit, I don't know, iffy is probably the right word. But today, of course, our focus is on looking back a little bit on yesterday. Of course, you know, we've spoken to a lot of stakeholders in the first hour with regards to Marikana, the massacre, and that's why we asked the question.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to get you involved in this conversation. We want to find out from you today, what lessons should we learn from Marikana?
You guys have been tweeting us quite a bit, and we heard a little bit earlier the lessons that the experts saying dialogue. We need to talk more before we shoot. Wilfred tells us sometimes we put our whole hopes in politicians, forgetting that they are the ones who makes matters worse.
Mr. Luiapunasi says, at Marikana, no justice has been served for the massacre and the wounds have not healed. Many lost lives and still no 12,500 rand.
Yeah. Of course, that was the number, 12,500. That was the number that the workers wanted, to be paid a living wage by Lonman. And it's right, nothing's happened since. But the big story, the story that has grabbed all the headlines, all the column space, and all the talking on social media is, of course, well, the Zimbabwe's High Commission. They've now sent a request to the Department of International Relations and Cooperation to invoke diplomatic immunity for the assault charges against First Lady of Zimbabwe, Grace Mugabe.
And we're asking you, therefore, should Grace Mugabe be granted diplomatic immunity on our poll? 436 votes, 84% of them saying no, she should not be granted diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, that's an emphatic no. An emphatic no, and that's the mood in South Africa with regards to the issue. Some people on social media are talking about our sovereignty and the integrity of our nation and the rule of law that needs to apply. I can't mention some of the other words that have been used, but there's a lot of emotion around this issue.
Nozu Kumede says, Grace is a disgrace to all First Ladies. Really, she should be ashamed of her behavior.
Lillian Mufambi tells us, why isn't SADC freeing us from these people? Why is the world so scared of Grace and her husband, I think is what Lillian is saying to us. Well, keep tweeting us, guys. This is the platform for you. Of course, we spoke about Barcelona a little bit earlier, and we put up the sports question. Is this the end of an era for Barcelona? Kendall, some are saying, don't be so quick on the draw.
Yeah, absolutely. That this started badly, having the same team that won the treble. But you know what? Marakeng Poe says Barcelona needs to reinvent its aging squad. There'll be no less development by the team. There's not enough development, Marakeng reckons.
Yeah, they've lost a big-time player and they're battling to sign new players. Billion Mulautsi tells us, no, not yet. It's just a warm-up. Well, it's cold out there if you don't have any friends. And if you can't sign the players, keep tweeting us, guys. Myself and Kendall are now going to give you the headlines. Infrastructure development amongst BRICS countries is expected to be at the center of the African Regional Center of the new development bank to be launched today. The question over whether Zimbabwe's First Lady Grace Mugabe can or cannot invoke diplomatic immunity over her assault case continues. And it's day 2 of the battle between 5 ANC branches in KwaZulu-Natal and the party's provincial leadership at the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Those are your top stories. Let's go over to Kendall to see what's happening in the world of sport.
Evan, thank you very much. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
A lot of people wrote us off after the Sharks loss in Durban. The guys really came back, beating Western Province on the Wednesday and beating the Cheetahs then on the Saturday.
The domestic rugby season is in full swing, and the Griquas are intent on making it 3 wins on the trot when they take on the Pumas at home this weekend.
We are now preparing for the second leg. We are going to Zambia. We have to go and work hard for another 90 minutes.
Thabo Sinong will be taking over from Stuart Baxter for Bafana's second leg tie chant qualify against Zambia in Ndola.
Marcelo pulls it back. Benzema!
Real Madrid destroy Barcelona 5-1 over 2 legs to take the Super Cup, extending Zinedine Zidane's extraordinary run at the helm of Los Blancos. All this and more we've got for you later on in the Sports Bulletin, around about 10:40 or so. Do stay with Evan as he's got the news.
Yeah, thank you, Kendall. Good morning. President Jacob Zuma will preside over the launch of the African Regional Centre of the new development bank in Johannesburg today. Also known as the BRICS Bank. It mobilizes resources for infrastructure and development projects in BRICS countries. The new bank has a starting capital of $100 billion. Our reporter Devin Murugan spoke with the bank's president, Kundapur Kamath, ahead of the launch. He began by asking how the NDB can justify issuing Eskom a $180 million loan in foreign currency.
From 2 years back to date, every single leader of the BRICS countries and the finance ministers talk of local currency, exactly in the context you did. So our plan now is renminbi for sure. India, there's a masala bond market, and we will access the offshore masala bond market in the next, in the latter part of this year. My earlier trip to South Africa, I sounded pension funds here in particular. I wasn't sure that there would be appetite, but there was for paper issued by an NDB. So I asked them, why will there be an appetite? They said, basically, we want to diversify risk. So long story short, China, India, South Africa, and a month back I was in Russia. Again, the same feeling that come and access our markets. I think this whole momentum toward de-risking our countries from externalities, I think is gathering great, pace. And we will certainly be looking at how we could lend in local currencies, a significant part of our lending program. Because honestly, as you say, there is no point in leaving residual risk on the currency to people who will follow us in the future.
Meanwhile, Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba says the launch of the regional office of the National Development Bank is a big and proud moment for South Africa. Minister Gigaba says the benefits of the bank, amongst others, include less stringent conditionalities when borrowing money. SABC News spoke to Minister Gigaba a little bit earlier today.
So the core mandate of the bank at the present moment is to become a multilateral international financial institution for BRICS member countries. As I say, over time, we will open up membership to other countries, not only from Africa and Latin America or Asia, but also even from Europe. If there are countries that are interested in joining the bank from Europe and elsewhere. But we are yet to agree on the principles upon which such membership will be open to other countries, because there are dynamics. We formed the bank for particular reasons. We were looking at how do you create a balance, a multipolarity in the international financial mechanism. And we established the bank in order to provide that counterweight, particularly in favor of developing countries, trying to give them a bigger voice. BRICS members are a significant voice within the G20. And the G20 constitutes about 90% of the membership of the IMF and the World Bank. And so we are a significant voice in this regard. I think the establishment of BRICS itself, now the launch of the BRICS, of the new development bank, otherwise known as the BRICS Bank, provides us that level of leverage, not only politically but also economically in global affairs. and so it is an important institution.
Let's get more detail on this story now. Our presidential correspondent, Mzwandile Mbeche, is standing by. Very good morning to you, Zwa.
A very good morning to you, Eben.
You look a little bit cold, but just give us a quick rundown of the importance of this institution and its role.
Indeed, Eben, it's very cold here in Sandton. You know, all of us thought winter had gone, and we were very wrong. So it's very cold. You know what I've just decided to do as we're walking around here, and then I saw the minister. I said, you know, as much as I can give you the rundown on what's going to happen, but here is the person in charge who should tell us exactly as we are here today. Minister, I know that earlier on you were with our program at SABC, but we are here. Just give us a rundown of what exactly is going to happen now.
Well, today is a milestone, both for South Africa, but as well for the new development bank. The very first regional center of the bank is being launched, the Africa Regional Center, which is going to provide loans and services to the African continent. You know that Africa has the $93 billion infrastructure funding gap. And with that, we should be able to address the various needs of our continent and countries, and ensure that we gain another 2% growth in terms of our GDP as the continent. And so today we are launching the Africa Regional Center. There is an acting head, but in due course the bank will be announcing a permanent head at a director general level in terms of the bank. The president is going to preside over this. President Kamath of the New Development Bank, accompanied by two vice presidents, is also here. One of the vice presidents is a South African well-known in the financial and banking sector, Mr. Leslie Masdorp. And then there is Mr. Jianzu, who is also the Chief Operating Officer of the New Development Bank. They are here to conduct the launch. We've invited various ministers, heads of business organizations, the deans of the diplomatic corps from the different regions, the various important people who are quite central to the work that we are here to do.
This launch comes, I think, 2 weeks before the BRICS summit in China. So is it a coincidence or it was deliberate?
Well, it's part of the ongoing work. We had a number of issues that we needed to resolve, including the host country agreement, which is also going to be signed today. You know, with the signing of the host country agreement, the opening of the center, we make a milestone towards ensuring that the operations of the bank actually commence on the African continent. The next important step will be the finalization of a project pipeline for South Africa that will be funded by the New Development Bank. We are looking at freight logistics, we're looking at energy and the various other projects that are going to be funded by the bank. As the president of the bank has indicated, the bank has earmarked between $1 billion to $2 billion for infrastructure funding in South Africa. You will appreciate that the bank loans to governments because they have a better risk profile, and they are, through their balance sheet, are able to carry the loans that are being provided by the bank. And so we are quite excited. I think that is going to assist to unlock additional funding to roll out infrastructure, because you know that infrastructure rollout is very crucial in a period of low growth as a counter-cyclical measure to drive growth in the economy, to boost demand and confidence, and ensure that we can create the jobs that we want and get our economy going. So we're quite excited with the steps that we are taking, and we will have something significant to report when the BRICS summit takes place in Jian in China.
Thank you very much, Minister. There was Minister of Finance, Minister Malusi Kaba, giving us a lowdown of things to happen. Eben, as we spoke earlier, what will happen is that President Jacob Zuma will officially cut the ribbon, so which signals that the Africa Regional Center of the BRICS Bank, the first since this initiative was conceived, in 2013 in India, and then of course finalized in Brazil in 2014, and then in 2016 the bank itself was actualized. So you can see since these 5 countries met, there's been some progress. You know, there are many interpretations to this. Is this an alternative to the IMF, or is it a new bank altogether? So I'm sure once it starts operating, people will be able to make their own views and perhaps perspectives with regards as to what exactly it's doing or what it's doing differently.
So thanks for that update. That's the presidential correspondent Mzwandile Mbeche coming to you live from Sandton, where that launch will happen shortly, sometime, well, around midday, we are told. Now, moving on. The Democratic Alliance says, according to the Diplomatic Immunities and Privileges Act, Zimbabwe's First Lady, Grace Mugabe, cannot invoke diplomatic immunity. This as she is not in the country in an official capacity, and the immunity extended to heads of state is not applicable to a First Lady. Meanwhile, the police department says they are waiting for guidance from international relations on how to proceed with assault charges against Zimbabwe's First Lady, Grace Mugabe. The Minister of Police has also confirmed that the Zimbabwean First Lady is still in South Africa.
More anger at police's failure to arrest Grace Mugabe. With contradictory reports, her exact whereabouts are yet to be confirmed.
We got a call that she would hand herself over. I was informed about that. And the whole of yesterday, we were waiting for her. Her lawyers arrived at Sandton police station around 6 o'clock in the morning. They said that they were coming to plead that she got diplomatic immunity. But we were supported by the National Deputy of Public Prosecution Advocate Sean Abrams and his the provincial head. And our position was that she must go to court.
Subsequent to this statement, the NPA denied Abrams was part of the negotiations. Meanwhile, there's confirmation the Zimbabwean First Lady is pinning her hopes on diplomatic immunity.
If she has really left the country, she will not only be compromising us, also her lawyers as well. It means that she would have lied to the lawyers as well. But that's a matter which we will come back to the committee about.
The acting police commissioner says Mugabe's lawyers promised to cooperate with the SABC. Some members of the committee have expressed concern at the failure to arrest Grace Mugabe. The acting police commissioner could not go into further details, only saying he's awaiting a report from the Gauteng police. Even attempts to get comment by the SABC were declined by the acting commissioner. President Robert Mugabe is expected to arrive in the country on Wednesday ahead of the SADC summit. Ulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
Of course, we're running that poll. We're asking you, what are you doing in this snap survey that we're putting out for our social media users on our Twitter platform? And we're asking you, should Grace Mugabe be granted diplomatic immunity? Well, it's an overwhelming no, I can tell you. Out of 436 votes, quite a few of you are voting and interested in this story. Of course, it has social media a buzz like few other stories have had social media a buzz in recent times. Let's take a look at some of your tweets. Mahafa Noel tells us she must face the law. I say no diplomatic immunity. Jamila van der Skype says she committed an assault on a woman which was brutal. She should be humiliated and her offense should be made a huge problem. This one from Figo, who says, Newsroom, may the grace of Mugabe not spoil your day. May the grace of God be with you. Keep tweeting us, guys. Keep telling us what you think. This is Newsroom. This is the platform where you can air your views on whatever is in the news. Now we move on, and what's very much in the news is that winter is making a late exit, and it's going out with a bang. This as snow falls in some parts of the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal amid a cold front is causing havoc. Snow has been reported in Elliot and the Sunny Mountain in the Eastern Cape, as well as in some parts of Impandle in the Midlands in KwaZulu-Natal. The cold temperatures have compelled most South Africans, including us here in Gauteng, to retrieve the winter woolies that were already packed away in anticipation of spring. Now, Snow Report South Africa's roving reporter Rob Ansell was at the sunny top this morning.
Morning, guys. Here we are at the top of Sani Pass this morning, and as you can see, the snow is coming down very nicely at the moment. We're expecting this to carry on for the whole day. It's just started settling around us, but further down the pass in the KZN Midlands near Mpendle, we're seeing some really nice falls down there. Moy River as well, got some falls going on there. Nottingham Road, we're told there's some snow happening there as well. Moving across to the Eastern Cape areas, we've got Maltino, we've got Dordrecht, we've got Elliot, we've got Lady Grey, Berkeley Pass, Berkeley East. So lots of snow action happening this morning and loads more snow expected today. We're going to do our best to keep you guys updated, and so we'll speak to you later.
Well, interesting. I can tell you the temperature's dropped. I can feel it here in the studio. Time to get those long johns out once again. It's really very cold. Moving on. Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga's decision to challenge last week's presidential election results in court has eased fears of further street protests in the East African country. At least 24 people have been killed since last week's vote, many of them shot by police. Odinga said yesterday that his opposition coalition, the National Super Alliance, had evidence of massive irregularities that slanted the results in favor of President Uhuru Kenyatta. The election board says Kenyatta beat Odinga by 1.4 million votes to win a second 5-year term. Odinga has until tomorrow to file his petition.
We had said that we will not go to court. But with the raid on civil society and determination to silence all voices that could seek legal redress, like the AFRICOG and the Kenya Human Rights Commission, you have now decided to move to the Supreme Court and lay before the world the making of a computer-generated leadership.
Further afield, US President Donald Trump has received high praise from white nationalist leaders after a press conference earlier this week in which he equated neo-Nazis, white supremacist groups with activists protesting their hateful agenda. The press conference at Trump Tower in New York was supposed to focus the president's infrastructure plans, but soon devolved into his reactions and views on the violent protests in Charlottesville, Virginia at the weekend, in which one person was killed and 19 others injured.
These were the third substantive remarks by the president since the clashes on Saturday. First, blaming the violence on many sides, and then under some pressure after a backlash, produced a more scripted response on Monday, assigning blame and condemning the far-right hate groups, including the KKK, who had gathered in Charlottesville. It all unraveled Tuesday at his residence in New York, where President Trump reverted to a bombastic brawl with the media, in which he argued for a moral equivalency between racist groups and those who oppose them.
There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
From both sides, sir, you said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame, yes. I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
The media have largely been unequivocal in their revulsion at the president's ambiguity, with major publications slamming his aspersions on the counter-protesters who had rallied to confront the hate groups. Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke tweeted his thanks to the president for setting the record straight.
Very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
Protesters again took to the streets, in the latest nationwide demonstrations against this president.
Just more horror at the moral equivalency, that there's two sides to every issue. There aren't two sides to every issue. Sometimes there's a right and a wrong, and yet again he's wrong, and I just want to be countered as someone saying he's wrong.
The remarks from the president reportedly caught Ebony's closest aides off guard, but it was the passion with which he defended the right of right-wing hate groups over those protesting their bigotry that has stunned many in just the latest scandal to further cloud his mere 7 months in office. Sherman Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General has warned that racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia were poisoning societies everywhere. He was responding to a question from SABC News after recent remarks by President Trump.
I'm afraid it's another President Donald Trump question. What is your reaction to the President's remarks yesterday that appear to have given a moral equivalency between neo-Nazi racist hate groups and those that gathered to protest their bigotry? What would you say to the President of the United States today?
Well, I do not comment on what presidents say. I affirm principles. And the principles I affirm are very clear. Racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism or Islamophobia are, as I mentioned yesterday, poisoning our societies. And it is absolutely essential for us all to stand up against them everywhere and every time. And I think that speaking as Secretary General, I should speak for the whole world, but speaking as a European, if there is something I am proud as a European is the contribution that Europe gave towards civilization with the values of the Enlightenment, tolerance, the respect for the other, the importance of the recognition of diversity, and to be able to stand for these values and to, at the same time, to condemn all forms of irrationality that undermine those values is essential at the present moment, be it in the United States or everywhere else in the world. Unfortunately, these demons are appearing a little bit everywhere.
Well, we're going to take a short little break. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back with more right after this.
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Welcome back. Let's go back to our theme today. Non-governmental organization, the Benchmarks Foundation, says the state has not taken responsibility for what happened in Marikana 5 years after the massacre. Victims of the Marikana tragedy are still waiting for compensation, and not a single police officer has been prosecuted. The 2012 shooting has left 34 striking Lonmin mine workers dead and a further 78 injured. By March of this year, summons for 652 claims were served for a total of 1.17 billion rand. The claimants were families of those who died and workers that were unlawfully arrested and detained. Now, the Executive Director of the Benchmarks Foundation, Mr. John Capel, he's with us in studio to give us his views. Very good morning to you, sir, and thank you for coming in with us today.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course, you've just returned from the 5th anniversary, can't call it celebrations, commemoration. What went through your mind while you were at this commemoration rallies there yesterday?
Well, what's been going through my mind for the last week is that it's 5 years on and we have had no justice for the victims of the Marikana massacre. That the company Lonmin has made no gesture towards rectifying what happened on the 16th of August 2012, that the shareholders are not interested, that the biggest buyer of platinum, BASF, are not interested. Government seem to be dragging their feet on the issue. The Farlam Commission blamed the workers. No one has been held accountable. So there's a lot of anger, frustration, and really this boils down to a question of human dignity, and why can't we respect that and restore the human dignity of the people impacted upon.
Can we make a distinction between the 34 mine workers that died on the day and the 10 that died before that, or should they be treated equally?
Well, I think there is a distinction, although all the deaths are sad. But the 34 that died on the 16th of August, many of those workers were shot in the back, and there's been no justice for that. What happened beforehand was a build-up of tensions between the company refusing to talk to the workers, the security guards shooting at workers, workers retaliating, workers marching to NUM offices, NUM coming out and shooting at them. So there's a whole, that's a whole inquiry in itself.
Yeah.
And then what happened on the 16th of August, I think we have to separate off.
You say government, the state in this case, not taken responsibility for what happened there. Just tell us, what do you mean when you say they haven't taken responsibility?
Well, no one's been held to account. No police officer has been charged. No senior government official or politician that must have made that decision has been charged. No one's been held accountable, and that's unacceptable.
Compensation. What do you think the way forward should be with regards to compensation in this matter?
Well, I think on the one hand, the state has a duty to compensate the victims, but so does Lonmin. I mean, Lonmin, we've said to Lonmin, you should pay the wages of the widows of those killed for the next 20 years to compensate them. And then there's also the injured mine workers, the trauma that they've faced and they've gone through. They need compensation. And we don't seem to be moving there. We don't seem to be burying this issue and learning from it and moving on as a country.
You talk about the learnings. Of course, that's the question we put to our viewers about what's the learnings. And our viewers are talking about, yeah, we learned we should have dialogues more about these things before we go for our weapons. What's the learnings you take from it, and how do you view this, this thought around dialogue?
Well, I think your viewers are correct. We need more dialogue in this country. We're not talking to each other. Those events on the 16th of August, our chairperson, Joe Sioka, was on the Hill trying to get, the workers said to him, get management please to come and talk to us, bring some food and water, and we couldn't get through. So that is a big, big problem. And we need actually to have what we are calling in benchmarks facilitated dialogue, someone in between, an expert specialist to help guide the parties to be able to reach out to each other.
It seems dialogue and debates in South Africa are for victory and not progress these days.
Yes. I think it's the blame game, and we need to move away from the blame game, and we need to address the fundamental issues around, especially around platinum, and those fundamental issues are around human dignity.
You touched on compensation. Let's just go back there. I just want to know, do you believe that there were agreements in place beforehand with regards to compensation, and why do you think this process is stuck in reverse a little bit?
Agreements in place. Well, all I know is that government offered $1 billion rand, and that is still up for discussion. They haven't seemed to have moved on that since the announcement. So, you know, as far as I can see, nothing is really happening.
AMCU have now stepped forward and they say because nothing is happening, they're going to the International Labour Organization at the United Nations. How do you view that?
Well, I think yes. You know, it's probably a good initiative to have interventions at the United Nations level, to have some kind of ruling on this, to have some kind of review of the proceedings, even the Farnham Commission proceedings.
The process going forward now, as the Benchmarks Foundation, what would you like to see happen right now and then in the next 5 years?
Well, I think we would like to see a situation across mining where we can get communities who are impacted upon, who are protesting daily, for example, that we can start to have bigger facilitated dialogue, that we can start to address the issues of human dignity, of economic empowerment, of social upliftment, and that we have to explore that. And I think that's the way to go, that we need an industry, we need a mind shift, we need a change in thinking, and we need a fundamentally new way to start to address these issues.
Is there an appetite amongst the mining companies for that kind of thing?
I think the appetite is going to start growing because they're facing protests daily. They themselves don't know how to address these issues. So as Benchmarks Foundation, we're developing what we call the independent problem-solving service as a means and a way where everything else has failed to find a way that something can work, and we think we've got it right.
How do we go about changing the mindset around mining in South Africa? It always seems that it's been a very exploitative industry. This needs to change. It needs to become less exploitative and more sustainable. Is that going to happen?
Yes, I think it was a failure really at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that failed to really address business and their role and their impacts and their support of apartheid. So we see many practices in the industry that remain as they were 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So that needs to be addressed. So we need a shift in thinking. We need a paradigm shift. And the challenge is out there to the industry.
Finally, the paradigm shift you're talking about, there's an idea in South Africa, in politics and business, that the future of this nation still lies under the ground with minerals. Is the paradigm shift not that we should think above the ground and start creating other alternatives?
No, it's true. And we're just extracting our minerals, for instance, with platinum, 80% of it's refined in Switzerland. The value of it's realized in Europe, is not realized in South Africa. So we need to start shifting how we use our platinum, how we extract, and how more people are involved, and then how do we build other industries around that, because our minerals are going to dry up.
Thank you, John. John Capel, the Executive Director of the Benchmarks Foundation, talking about justice for Marikana 5 years later. Time for another break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
What guides us? Is it something you can touch, hear, feel, or see? What leads us onto greater experiences? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
back. My name is Kendall Makamate on this beautiful, very crisp morning in Johannesburg. We've got the sports for you, and we start off a little differently today, where we talk about Zinedine Zidane and how he's expanded on his incredible record as a coach last night as Real Madrid won their second trophy of the 2017-2018 season before the Spanish league has even begun. Real beat Barcelona 5-1 on aggregate in the Spanish Super Cup. Meanwhile, Napoli, Sevilla and Celtic took big steps towards the group stages of the UEFA Champions League as they registered wins in the first legs of their playoff round ties last night. Let's take a look.
Nice debut in the defeat at the weekend. Saint-Maximin, now the goalkeeper's come out, and it's a brilliant finish.
Napoli were the quickest out of the starting blocks against Nice. Jorginho doubled Napoli's lead with a penalty in the second half.
A rare penalty taker. Puts it away with aplomb.
The visitors finished with 9 men as Vincent Coziello was shown a straight red for a dangerous tackle. And the Alazzane player received a second yellow card for protesting. Napoli won the match 2-0.
Good offer here from Escudero. Oh, he scored!
Sevilla also set themselves up for a place in the group stage by beating Istanbul Başakşehir 2-1 in Turkey. Sergio Escudero opened the scoring for Sevilla after 16 minutes, with El Gero Elia getting the equalizer in the 64th minute.
To get through here. Oh, yes he has! And it went right through the goalkeeper, Sergio Rico.
Wissam Ben Yedder scored the winner 6 minutes from time.
Comes a shot from Ben Yedder. It's 2-1 to Sevilla.
In other matches, Celtic thrashed Astana 5-0 in Glasgow. Israel's Hapoel Beersheva beat Maribor of Slovenia 2-1 at home, while Olympiacos beat Croatian side Rijeka by the same scoreline in Greece. In the Spanish Super Cup return leg, Barcelona had no answer to Real Madrid's quick passing, high tempo and slick movement. Real had a good start, with Marco Asensio finding the back of the net inside the first 5 minutes of the match.
Marco Asensio! Oh! He scores some special goals. Some Real Madrid fans in front of me clutched their head in disbelief.
Karim Benzema made it 2-0 before half-time.
Benzema! Oh, that was coming.
Any attempts by the visitors to play out from the back were closed down quickly and with purpose. Zidane's troops won the match 2-0 without suspended talisman Cristiano Ronaldo. Mtutuzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
And so we've been asking you a question today about what happened last night and the week before as well. Is this the end of an era for Barcelona? Losing 2-0 on the night, it's the first time they've never scored in El Clásico in the longest time ever. You have been tweeting us your responses to that question of ours, where one dealer says Barcelona must get rid of the old players because their counterparts had knowledge of their style of playing. New blood is needed ASAP. Billion Mulauzi says, no, not yet. Barcelona, it's not end of an era yet. It's just a warm-up. Don't worry. No, nothing to see here. Move on. Maraking says FC Barcelona need to reinvent its aging squad. There have been less of development by the team. Now, we're staying with football news, but bringing it back home. The opening Absa Premiership fixture on Friday night between league defending champions Bidvest Wits and Cape Town City will pit a master against his student. Wits coach Gavin Hunt will be coming up against Benny McCarthy, the man he gave his professional debut at 7 Stars back in 1995. The two sides were separated by just 5 points at the end of last season, with the Clever Boys being crowned champions and City finishing third in their maiden season.
Both Wits and Cape Town City managed to advance to the semi-finals of the MTN 8 competition last weekend. City is one of the few sides that managed to beat Wits at their home ground last season, getting 4 out of a possible 6 points from the defending champions. In the first round, Wits lost 3-2, with the other match ending in a stalemate in Cape Town. Under newly appointed coach McCarthy, Hunt is expecting another tough battle this season.
I know him very well, the boy. I mean, you know, I had 2-3 years with him as a kid. So, I mean, as a player, what he's achieved is phenomenal. But as a coach, as you know, you start from the bottom again. So, let's see how he does after a couple of games, and then we can judge from there. You know, but you know, he's enthusiastic, got good knowledge of the game, and I wish him well. So.
Unfortunately, Hunt will not be on the bench on Friday after receiving a red card in the MTN 8 quarter-final clash against Golden Arrows.
From our point of view, everything remains the same. Our planning and preparation is done during the week, certainly not obviously during the 90 minutes of the game. Yeah, there might be little tweaks and little bits and bobs to do, but it's certainly done, planning and preparation, and to be carried out on game day. So I'll be there, obviously without Gavin, but everything will be in place and we'll continue as normal.
Vets are looking for a positive start in their quest to defend their league crown. Their high-profile signing, Steven Pinar, is aiming to make a big contribution.
Yeah, obviously I'm looking forward to play against him as a coach, not as a player. Yeah, obviously for us the most important thing is to win the game. It's not going to be easy, but yeah, I think all the guys are ready for Friday. It's the first game. You want to start the league good. So for us, there's going to be a lot of pressure as well, defending the league.
The two clubs will meet again in the two-legged MTN 8 semi-finals, having drawn each other on Sunday. Sfiso Ramara, SABC News, Johannesburg.
I'll have you know that these two sides will be meeting again, but this time in the MTN 8 semi-finals. And next Saturday, it's going to be Cape Town City hosting Wits. Let's see whether this is going to be a precursor for that or whether they'll have a different result come next week, Saturday. Now, Bafana head coach Stuart Baxter will not be traveling to Zambia. This is with the squad for the second leg of the 2018 African Nations Championship qualifier. Bafana faced their hosts in Ndola on Saturday in a must-win encounter after their 2-2 draw in East London last weekend. Assistant coach Thabo Sunong will lead the team to Zambia. He will be accompanied by former Bafana legend Quinton Fortune, who's currently with the SAFA technical team. Baxter remains behind to focus on the upcoming crucial back-to-back 2018 FIFA World Cup qualifiers against Cabo Verde. The first match takes place on the 1st of next month in Cabo Verde, with the return fixture 4 days later at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban. Meanwhile, Ajax Cape Town defender Roscoe Peterson is the latest player to join Bafana in camp. His arrival brings to 20 the number of players on national duty. The squad departs for Zambia today at 10:20. Now, learners from the Itembelihle Comprehensive School in Port Elizabeth braved the cold weather conditions to rub shoulders with their rugby heroes this morning. The Springbok players took time off from practice ahead of their clash with Argentina on Saturday to encourage learners to stay away from social ills and focus on sport. This program falls under the Love Rugby School initiative that aims to promote rugby at disadvantaged schools.
Close up and personal with their sporting heroes, Itembelihle Comprehensive School was established in 1963 and compete with some of top rugby schools in the metro. The occasion was rewarding for both learners and Springbok players.
Me, myself, coming from a very disadvantaged area, to see Springboks in your presence is something that's great. And for us, it's just amazing to be able to see the smiles on the kids when they see us, that we know that they're behind us, they're supporting us. So for us, it's a great initiative to be able to just to be around.
Despite poor facilities and lack of resources, they are a force on the field of play. Styles and techniques were shared.
I feel ecstatic, proud and privileged to rub shoulders with the Springboks today, and I wish them luck on the game on Saturday.
I am so happy today. We normally see them on TV, but Itembelihle Comprehensive is no stranger to the limelight. They won the Best Development School in the country at the SA Sport Awards in 2012. Their first rugby team has also claimed the scarves of top rugby schools such as Daniel Pina and Friendsby High Schools. Zolani Moya, SABC News.
Phenomenal. I'll have you know, this morning the Boks are out in Port Elizabeth, causing chaos in the traffic, meeting and greeting with commuters as they go to work, and just building up the gees and building up the spirit ahead of that opening rugby championship match they're playing against Argentina on the weekend. Now, Griquas are brimming with confidence after 2 huge Currie Cup wins inside 4 days. After 3 straight defeats in this year's major domestic rugby competition, the Kimberley-based side beat Western Province last Wednesday, and then defending champions the Cheetahs in Bloemfontein on Saturday. And this weekend, they're up against the Pumas in the Diamond City.
It was not the ideal start to the season, but 3 successive defeats were followed by 2 victories, and the Griquas are now 3rd on the log.
I think no one gave us a chance after a lot of people wrote us off after the Sharks loss in Durban. The guys really came back, beating Western Province on the Wednesday and beating the Cheetahs then on the Saturday. So I think the Western Province win gave the guys a lot of belief, and it was a brilliant performance in Bloemfontein after a very tough week to get that performance in Bloem.
Those 2 back-to-back victories have done wonders for the confidence and the mood in the camp.
The winning spirit is nice because if you win, your team is always on a high, and the guys enjoy the practice, so practice make perfect.
6 players are still nursing injuries and hope to be back in action soon. This will be the Griquas testing ground on Sunday. Should they reign victorious, they might climb the log sheet a little higher. Sunday's match kicks off at 2:30 p.m. in the Diamond City. Reginald Witbooi, SABC News, Kimberley.
Now to tennis, where Rafael Nadal cruised to victory over Richard Gasquet in his first match since clinching a return to world #1 at the Cincinnati Masters. Meanwhile, Alexander Zverev's 10-match win streak was halted in 3 sets by US teen wildcard Francis Tiafoe. In earlier results, Bulgarian 7th seed Grigor Dimitrov beat Feliciano Lopez 7-6, 6-4 at the Cincinnati Open to set up a last 16 clash with Juan Martín del Potro. Dimitrov, who beat Lopez in the second round here last year, nearly broke the unseeded Spaniard 3 times prior to making a strong start in the tiebreak. And he went on to finish the match with 27 winners. Next up for Dimitrov will be del Potro, who's playing at Cincinnati for the first time in 4 years after reaching the semi-finals in 2012 and 2013. The 28-year-old Argentine booked his spot in the next round with a 6-4, 6-4 win over Mitchell Creer, breaking the American qualifier at the end of both sets. Dimitrov has not beaten del Potro in 5 career meetings, with the most recent defeat coming at Rome in May. Australian Nick Kyrgios beat Ukraine's Alexander Dolgopolov 6-3, 7-6 to reach the 3rd round, where he will face unseeded Croatian Ivo Karlovic. And that is where we leave it with the sport. We'll be back in the next hour with a whole lot more. Up next, the weather forecast.
Oh, thank you very much. Let's take a look at what's going to happen for today. Well, as I'm sure you've been hearing, it is cold, it is snowing, very bad weather for today. But let me just summarize it for you. Starting off mainly in the Eastern Cape, that's where we're seeing most of the activity, starting off with isolated showers over the interior. That's accompanied by snowfalls, which is just light over the high-lying areas. But as you move towards the coastal areas, that's where we see more of the rainfall, to about 80% chance of rainfall, mainly along the coastal areas in places like PE, through towards Margate, Port St. John's, all along the coastal areas. Do be careful of those heavy rainfalls. There is a watch all along the southeast coastline, all the way from the southern parts towards the north. Otherwise, isolated showers are expected for Mpumalanga province later on today. For now, we're expecting clear skies, although it is chilly right now with the clear skies starting in Mpumalanga, Gauteng, Limpopo, and northwest. Don't be fooled as you get out to going wherever you're going to get a jersey, as it will continue being cold for the rest of the day. In the northern parts, however, like in places like Zimbabwe, Zambia, into Angola, we're seeing hotter temperatures, and especially in Botswana, hotter temperatures. But the southern parts of those countries, like southern parts of Botswana, is also seeing colder temperatures for today and into tomorrow. Tomorrow's weather still similar to what we're having today, except just less rainfall over the Eastern Cape. Now everything is moving towards KwaZulu-Natal, where we're still seeing snowfalls possible over the high-lying areas, especially in the interior, and heavy rain scattered to widespread rainfall expected along the coastal areas of KwaZulu-Natal. Otherwise, the rest of the country, partly cloudy weather for Free State, Northwest, and Western Cape Province. Clear skies in Northwest, but still temperatures are very, very cold. But before we get to temperatures, let's look at your warnings for today. Disruptive snowfalls are possible in the southern part of Lesotho, just the southern parts of Lesotho into the Eastern Cape. This is places where we're already seeing some snowfalls, and it's expected to continue for the rest of the day. And remember, remember that heavy rainfall expected from PE. It's a watch all through to Mthatha and ending up in the eastern parts of KwaZulu-Natal with those strong winds possible along the coastal areas. Right, your temperatures, what you're mainly looking for in the southern parts, you're expecting Pretoria at 15 degrees, Polokwane at 20, and looking at just the general feeling is that it's basically a cold day for today. And just once again, those are your maximum temperatures. Cape Town at 17, PE at 12 degrees, Sutherland always cold with a maximum of 10 degrees. As you can see, Durban only peaking at 16 degrees today, expecting a cloudy day over most of the KwaZulu-Natal coastline. Into the northern parts where we're seeing that it is a bit cool over places like Namibia. We're seeing Windhoek at 18 degrees and southern parts of Botswana at 17. It is cool, but in the north we're seeing very hot temperatures. Victoria Falls at 32 degrees and Harare at 27. Even on the islands we're still seeing warmer weather as if there is no cold front. A cold front is only here in southern Africa. As you can see, 29 for places like Moroni. Just last but not least, another maximum that you can see over the central parts of Africa, Bengu at 29 as well. Kinshasa peaking at 30. I will leave it here for your newsroom weather, but remember, everywhere you go, take the weather with you.
I think winter is definitely one of those seasons where you can really show off your sartorial choices. You can start from a single layer of a shirt, actually starting with thermals, build it up with the shirts. You can have beautiful knits over the shirts, like we've done with Jay.
This film tells the story of a very, very significant political figure in the struggle for freedom in South Africa, who happened to be a woman. She was Nelson Mandela's wife.
The exhibition is an exploration into black femininity. Tabitha is a woman of colour, and she is exploring the historical exploitation of the black female body.
Newtown Junction Mall hosted an epic contest in the cold where 3 top South African graffiti artists battled it out for the opportunity to become the Newtown Graffiti Face-Off Master.
For your weekly dose of entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
What is environmental health?
In Section 24 of the Constitution, the environmental right has a second part, which is to encourage people to be active citizens and gives us the right to participate in politics and organize and raise.
Welcome back. President Jacob Zuma is presiding over the launch of the African Regional Center of the new Development Bank in Johannesburg. Let's go there live.
Thank you very much and congratulations. It's now my great pleasure to invite the President of the New Development Bank, Mr. KV Kamath, to present his remarks. Mr. President.
Good morning. Your Excellency, President Zuma, honorable ministers, Honorable Ambassadors, Other Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends and colleagues. I'm delighted to be here in South Africa and extend to you a very warm welcome from the New Development Bank. It's an honor for us to have you all present here at the opening ceremony of the Africa Regional Center. The NDB looks forward to working closely with you as we grow our operations in South Africa and over time, the African continent. The establishment of the ARC, which is the first regional office of the NDB, is an important milestone of the bank. It marks the fulfillment of a commitment made by the founders of the bank in its Articles of Agreement. We sincerely appreciate the strong support that we have received from the ministries, various ministries in the South African government, which has allowed us to reach this milestone. I particularly would like to thank Her Excellency, the Minister for International Relations, and His Excellency, the Minister of Finance, and indeed, you, sir, President Zuma, for all the support that we have received. The presence of President Zuma and the honorable ministers here demonstrates the importance of the ARC and the NDB to the Republic of South Africa. Thank you for your presence and support. The NDB will strive to meet the expectations you have from it. The ARC will be the face of the NDB in Africa. It will progressively undertake a growing range of the bank's work, beginning with project identification and preparation. I would like to begin by sharing some thoughts with you on the progress that NDB has made thus far. The bank started operations in July 2015. In the 2 years since then, the bank has laid a foundation in all functional areas, and we have started building on this foundation. With the support of all our members, including South Africa, we have put in place policies, procedures, and processes that guide our work. In 2016, the NDB approved 7 projects, all broadly in the area of sustainable infrastructure, totaling over US dollars 1.5 billion to all our 5 member countries. In 2017, we expect to approve loans aggregating between US dollars 2.5 to US dollars 3 billion for about 10 projects. In 2018, we expect to present about 15 to 20 projects to our board, involving a total lending of about US dollars 4 billion for the board's consideration. Our target is to end 2018 with a total loan book of about US dollars 8 billion for approximately 35 projects. In 2018, we also plan to begin our private sector operations and explore investments in public-private partnership projects. We are working closely with authorities in South Africa to identify a strong pipeline of projects that we can support. As I have mentioned earlier, from now on, we expect that our ARC will play a major role in project identification and preparation. In fact, the last 2 days, my message to the team in Shanghai and the team which will be resident here is that we have an appetite to do about $1.5 billion of lending to South Africa over the next 18 months. And the task that is before the members of the ARC is to make sure that this pipeline gets fructified into actual lending projects. So upfront, I want to say that a target has been set, and we will make sure that our team strives and drives the target. I'm taking this occasion because it's a public occasion, and I always feel stronger when, with such strong backing, the minister, from the president and the ministers, I make this commitment so that the team then can set the goal. NDB has thus far received total capital contributions of about US dollars 2.6 billion, including advance payments from some of our member countries, in this instance, China and Russia. We expect to receive another US dollar 900 million by January 2018. Timely and even advanced receipt of capital contributions from all our members is a strong vote of confidence in the institution and sends a positive signal to the global community about the commitment of our founders. I would like to thank the South African authorities for their timely capital contributions. Till date, the bank has raised about US dollars 450 million equivalent from the Chinese financial markets through a renminbi green bond issue. We plan to raise additional funding of between $2 to $2.5 billion between now and the end of 2018 through local currency bonds, which I'll speak of a little later, in our member countries, as well through hard currency bond issues. We believe that South African market offers attractive opportunities for fundraising, and at the appropriate time, we will work with authorities here in South Africa and explore these opportunities to raise RAND funds. In line with this fundraising objective, the bank will formally begin the process of obtaining its international credit rating in the next few months. The bank's general strategy, which lays down a framework in which the bank will operate over the next 5 years, was approved in July 2017. The strategy targets a total lending volume of about $32 billion by 2021, including local currency financing. It's a living document and will evolve both as the bank itself evolves and as the external landscape within which the bank operates evolves. The bank has so far hired about 100 staff from its member countries through a rigorous and transparent selection process on the principles of meritocracy and gender equality. We propose to have about 150 staff on board by this year and about 220 staff by the end of 2018. One element of the NDB's mandate is to complement the work being done by existing institutions. Towards this end, the bank has entered into formal cooperation agreements with many global, regional, and national institutions. These partnerships enable the bank's learning in critical areas and promote South-South cooperation, supporting knowledge and expertise transfer among our members. These partnerships also help us achieve our objective of being a lean institution in terms of staffing. We aim to have critical core skills within the institution while leveraging the resources and knowledge of other institutions through partnerships and collaborations. We will minimize duplication of efforts. Another element of the bank's mandate is to operate largely within the geographical boundaries of its member countries. Therefore, expanding operations of the bank to countries other than its members will mean expanding the membership of the bank. In April 2017, the Board of Governors took the first step towards this objective and approved the terms, conditions, and procedures for admission of new members to the bank. Next steps in this process will be taken as per the guidance of our Board of Governors. The NDB's mandate is to finance infrastructure and sustainable development. NDB's activities have thus far been and will continue to be focused in these areas. NDB's activities are geared to strongly supporting its member commitments and objectives under the COP21 agreement and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. The multilateral development banking industry is now more than 70 years old. In this industry, the NDB is the youngest institution established in the 21st century. This gives us the advantage of learning from past experiences, coming up with innovations, and incorporating them into our operations. Innovation will be a key area of emphasis for the NDB. One area that NDB will innovate in and focus on is lending in local currency in our member countries, something that is not happening or happening to only a limited extent currently. Having been a banker all my life, I'm a firm believer that reducing the exchange rate risk inherent in foreign currency financing can enable infrastructure projects to be financed more sustainably. More projects are likely to become sustainable and bankable if they face lesser exchange rate risk. The effective cost of such borrowings to member countries will also be significantly lower. The NDB has begun the process of local currency lending in its operations in China. Subject to local market conditions and subject to the governments of our member countries wanting to borrow in local currencies, the bank would be very happy to examine the feasibility of providing similar local currency loans to our other member countries, including South Africa. Overall, the NDB has made a strong start as a new entrant to the community of multilateral development banks. Of course, we have a lot to learn, and we are actively doing so. We believe we also have new ideas to contribute. We will continue to expand the scale and scope of our operations as we grow. And we are confident that South Africa will be a significant country of operations for the bank, especially with our on-ground footprint of the ARC and especially the opportunities that the African continent will provide as we mature and grow. I want to now turn to a little more detail about the role of the ARC. As I mentioned earlier, the ARC will be the face of the NDB in Africa. Organizationally, the ARC forms a part of the Operations Vice Presidency of the bank, headed by Mr. Zushian, our Vice President and Chief Operations Officer. It will be headed by a person of the level of Director General, the highest level of staff in the bank. This demonstrates the importance that NDB believes that the ARC needs to deliver on its mandate. The ARC's initial emphasis will be on identification and preparation of projects in South Africa. This it will do in line with South Africa's own National Development Plan, which the government has adopted as a blueprint. The NDB and the ARC will aim to partner with the government to achieve the goals that have been set up. Of particular relevance to the NDB is the National Infrastructure Development Plan, which is a part of the National Development Plan, which sets out a series of ambitious and far-reaching initiatives envisaged to transform South Africa's economic landscape. We expect that initiatives that NDB supports will form a part of the strategic investment projects identified by the government. The ARC will work closely with the government, public and private sector agencies, and other relevant stakeholders in South Africa in identifying these projects which have a strong developmental impact. It will play a role in preparing these projects so that they can be financed subsequently. The ARC will also support the effective and efficient implementation of these projects. Over time, the ARC's activities will expand both in scale and scope. It could, in due course, play a role in sharing knowledge and development experience across countries. It would also play a role in coordinating the NDB's partnership and collaboration with institutions on the continent. As and when the Board of Governors approve expansion of NDB's operations in other countries in Africa, the ARC could also play a leading role in initiating and scaling up the NDB's work in those countries. I believe that through the ARC, we are planting a seed. As the NDB's own operations grow, so will this seed sprout and grow as the ARC takes on an increasingly larger role for its own work within NDB. Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted that you could grace this important occasion, and thank you all for being here. The ARC is critical to the bank's future activities in Africa. It's an important element of the bank's strategy. On behalf of the bank staff and management, I give my assurance that we'll work hard to ensure it succeeds. I expect one byproduct of the ARC is the NDB will be better known in South Africa. One challenge we have been facing is to attract the brightest talent from South Africa. I want to say that at our young professional levels, which is where we take in the brightest youngsters, typically below 30, we have a very strong inflow of applications from South Africa. And I also want to say that that application flow is gender neutral. We have as many women as men applying for positions there. And indeed, we are filling those positions. Our challenge has been as we go higher. And that, I think, part of the challenge was our name was not well known, and I believe this occasion, sir, gives us an opportunity to present ourselves and build on the goodwill so that we can attract the best talent from South Africa as we go and build our organization. I also seek your support in making the NDB and ARC a success. I invite you to help us establish the ARC and the NDB as important contributors to the development of South Africa and as useful participants in the development agenda of the continent. Going forward, we trust that we will be able to bring in experience that will be useful to the entire African continent. In all this work, the ARC will be the face of the bank in Africa. Thank you again for your support and attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the President of the New Development Bank, Mr. Kamath, for his most insightful remarks, and I think a very useful overview, particularly for us in South Africa, and we hope the media will help communicate the progress that the NDB has begun to make, the very impressive indication of projects that are to receive support in the various BRICS countries. So the bank is working, the bank is underway, and we need to believe in its reality. And I think Mr. Kamath has provided a very, very useful overview of the work that is being done. I wanted to share with you, Mr. Kamath, the trouble we often experienced through our president demanding that we should have this launch. He established a committee of ministers, and most unusually, we normally, when we have such committees, we operate fairly independently. But with this particular one, we had massive interference and would be called to explain why the bank has not been, the regional center has not been opened, where is the building, when will it be operational, and come back in 7 days with an answer. We were horrified, but here we are. So, Mr. President, Zuma, you've achieved your objectives. We are here, the work has been done. Of course, we were led in an absolutely sterling fashion by the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, as well as supported by our colleague in finance, Minister Gigaba, and his team. So it's taken quite a lot of work to get to this step, and we are most hopeful that we're going to see the impact of the NDB on the development imperatives, both of South Africa and the broader African continent. It's now my great honor and privilege to invite His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Zuma, to deliver the keynote address. Mr. President.
Thank you very much indeed. Key and the note and the address. Yes. Honorable ministers and deputy ministers were present here. Mr. Kamath, the president of the New Development Bank, captains of industry and finance sectors who are present here, members of the diplomatic corps, particularly the ones from the member countries of BRICS. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. We are truly delighted to share this extremely important occasion with you. The launch of the African Regional Center of the New Development Bank is a historic occasion, as it marks the strengthening of the BRICS formation and also underlines the BRICS commitment to the development of the African continent and emerging markets. This is a critical milestone, not only for South Africa, but for the African continent as a whole. We are thus celebrating it as a shared achievement. The idea of establishing a new bank with a new mission and orientation was first discussed in Durban in 2013, when we had the honor of hosting the BRICS Forum. We later agreed to establish a center in Africa to take care of the important developmental needs of this continent. The launch of the Africa Regional Center is testament to our commitment that BRICS and the new development bank should benefit not only BRICS countries, but should also benefit the whole of Africa and the developing world as a whole. In fact, when this bank was launched here, when we hosted BRICS, it was for the first time we had what has become a culture of BRICS, the outreach program, wherein a number of heads of states from the continent attended one session with the leaders of BRICS and indeed raised their issues and expectations, and indeed I'm sure that convinced the BRICS leaders that establishing this center here will go a long way to help Africa's development. This is therefore truly a proud moment which points to a brighter future for the people of our continent and the developing world in general. Program Director, in the 2 years of the bank's existence, I have been most pleased at the progress that it has made. Notable achievement in this regard includes the signing of the founding agreement of the new development bank, which paved the way for the opening of the bank's head office in Shanghai, in China, the issuance of the first set of loans amounting to 1.5 billion US dollars, approximately 20 billion rands in total, to fund renewable energy projects in member countries is a significant step forward indeed. The bank's very first green bond issuance in the Chinese capital market, mobilizing about $450 million in the process, is also noteworthy. And most recently, the approval of a general strategy that will guide the bank's operations in the next 5 years demonstrates that we are on the right path. Today, we gather to celebrate yet another milestone, the launch of the African Regional Center. I wish to thank the New Development Bank President, Mr. Kamath, and his team for the excellent work over the years, which has brought us to this momentous occasion. We are confident that the bank will build on these achievements and grow from strength to strength. Next, the bank will start the process to consider new members and finalize the project pipeline for the second batch of loans to be offered in the 2017-2018 financial year. We wish the bank well in these endeavors. The biggest challenge is that Africa remains largely unindustrialized, with the result that our economies are overexposed to the whims of commodities markets. African countries generally do not have adequate infrastructure interconnections. As a result, we cannot maximize the benefits of regional trade. Worse still, the continent does not have adequate social infrastructure for the provision of basic services such as health and education, and we therefore are not able to significantly improve the living standards of our people. Indeed, due to this infrastructure gap, Africa has been unable to unlock its growth potential and bring prosperity to her people. But of course, it is not because of Africa's shortcomings. These unfortunate things were imposed to them, and they were restricted not to do anything. If anything, every activity was channeled in a particular way. And I'm making this point because people must not ask the question, where were the Africans? What were they doing? Were they sleeping? No, it wasn't. We believe time has come for Africa, and indeed, the very fact that we have such an important bank resident in this continent, that means Africa is on the move. Given these challenges, the African continent has great expectations for the new development bank, particularly because of its experience with regard to how difficult it has been to be able to get finances for Africa to do its own. We expect that the bank, through the African Regional Center, will contribute to accelerating infrastructure investment in energy, transport, water, and other productive sectors. South Africa, since its joining of BRICS in 2011, has advocated for inclusivity of the global South, especially the African continent. We are therefore happy to know that the bank is working on expanding its membership to other countries beyond BRICS. We certainly trust that African countries will be among the first to take up membership at the new development bank. Ladies and gentlemen, 70 years after the end of the Second World War, the world continues to be plagued by the endemic problems of poverty and human suffering, more so in the African continent. The recent bout of violence and military confrontation in some countries in the Middle East and Africa has notably exacerbated this problem. These tragic realities highlight the need for new and sustainable solutions. We therefore call on the new development bank and like-minded institutions to test new boundaries, explore new possibilities, and deliver sustainable solutions that will better serve humanity. I've been very happy, Mr. President, for you to make an important point that this bank will deal with countries, in some cases, on the local currencies. I think that is indeed a new outlook, a new approach that says the finances of this bank are there to help people to develop, to assist them, not to put them into more burdens by saying look for a particular currency which they don't have. This is an indication of the new approach by this new bank. I'm encouraged by the recent announcement made at the second annual meeting of the New Development Bank Board of Governors in New Delhi to increase the bank's lending to $2.5 billion in the 2017-2018 financial year. This announcement has come at an opportune time for South Africa as we need more projects at this point in time. We have great expectations for this regional office. We would like to see an office that is geared towards fulfilling the New Development Bank's founding objectives. These are to foster the development of member countries, support economic growth, promote and facilitate job creation, and to build a knowledge-sharing platform among developing countries. The regional office will have to extend its core focus beyond project identification and preparation if it wants to truly realize these objectives. The office should, in time, be given the autonomy to extend loans to qualifying countries in the continent, whilst also serving as a node for capacity building and knowledge sharing. However, the bank is still in its infancy stage, and understandably, such an expansion would be carried out in phases. But from your own presentation, Mr. President, this morning, you seem to have the enthusiasm and passion and ideas supported by a capable team that understands the challenges of developing countries. We are very happy to be part of this new approach globally. I'm sure the world will never be the same with the coming into being of the BRICS Bank and the BRICS Group. distinguished guests, it is fitting that we celebrate this launch in the same year that we celebrate the centenary of one of our founding fathers, isithwalandwe Oliver Reginald Tambo. This giant of our liberation struggle envisaged an Africa that was at peace with itself and in the world. He also envisaged one in which all its citizens enjoyed unlimited economic prosperity through cooperation and shared ideas. The launch of the New Development Bank's first regional office is a major step towards the realization of O.R. Tambo's vision for our country and indeed our continent. Indeed, this is a turning point for Africa and its development. This new bank will enable continued fruitful cooperation with our global partners, which will help us promote sustainable development through integration, industrialization, and infrastructure development on the continent. The launch takes place during the week in which we are hosting the 37th Southern African Development Community Heads of State and Government Summit in our country. The summit takes place under the theme, partnering with the private sector in developing industry and regional value chains. SADC celebrates 25 years of existence this year, and membership has grown to 15 countries. The combined population is about 300 million people. South Africa will assume the chair of SADC this week, and projects such as the New Development Bank will be supported and promoted in earnest as part of advancing Africa's development agenda. Mr. Kamath, the president of this New Development Bank, ministers, distinguished guests, it is my pleasure and honor to declare the African Regional Center of the New Development Bank officially opened for business. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause to the President, please. Thank you very much to President Zuma for his keynote address. I think the President of the New Development Bank would certainly have got a sense of the hope and aspiration that lies in this launch, and the very deep belief that we have as South Africa in the role that the New Development Bank will play, both in our country, but as the President has indicated, in the African continent as well. We firmly hold to the belief that the progressive agenda to create a new progressive path in the world that has been adopted by BRICS will be fully realized through the work that you will lead in the New Development Bank. And as we heard you speak in your remarks earlier, there was quite an amazing complementarity between your remarks and those of the President, signaling again that we are absolutely correct in the hope and aspiration we hold in the work that the NDB would do. So we wish the Centre well, and we wish you well in your leadership, not just of the bank in Shanghai, its headquarters, but in all the places where it will exist. Thank you very much for your presence here.
Welcome back to you. My name is Kendall Makamati, coming straight back to you from that very interesting and momentous occasion to bring you some of the sporting news that's been making headlines all around the world. Speaking of which, we start off with a story from over there in Europe, where Zinedine Zidane expanded on his incredible record as a coach last night as Real Madrid won their second trophy of the 2017-2018 season before the Spanish league has even begun. Real beat Barcelona 5-1 on aggregate in the Spanish Super Cup. Meanwhile, Napoli, Sevilla and Celtic took a big step towards the group stages of the UEFA Champions League as they registered wins in the first legs of their playoff round ties last night. Mdudu Ndlovu reports.
Nice debut in the defeat at the weekend. Saint-Maximin, now the goalkeeper's come out, and it's a brilliant finish.
Napoli were the quickest out of the starting blocks against Nice. Jorginho doubled Napoli's lead with a penalty in the second half.
A rare penalty taker. Puts it away with aplomb.
The visitors finished with 9 men as Vincent Coziello was shown a straight red for a dangerous tackle. And the Alazzane player received a second yellow card for protesting. Napoli won the match 2-0.
Good offer here from Escudero. Oh, he scored!
Sevilla also set themselves up for a place in the group stage by beating Istanbul Başakşehir 2-1 in Turkey. Sergio Escudero opened the scoring for Sevilla after 16 minutes, with El Gero Elia getting the equalizer in the 64th minute.
To get through here. Oh, yes he has! And it went right through the goalkeeper, Sergio Rico.
Wissam Ben Yedder scored the winner 6 minutes from time.
Comes a shot from Ben Yedder. It's 2-1 to Sevilla.
In other matches, Celtic thrashed Astana 5-0 in Glasgow. Israel's Hapoel Beersheva beat Maribor of Slovenia 2-1 at home, while Olympiacos beat Croatian side Rijeka by the same scoreline in Greece. In the Spanish Super Cup return leg, Barcelona had no answer to Real Madrid's quick passing, high tempo and slick movement. Real had a good start, with Marco Asensio finding the back of the net inside the first 5 minutes of the match.
Marco Asensio! Oh! He scores some special goals. Some Real Madrid fans in front of me clutched their head in disbelief.
Karim Benzema made it 2-0 before half-time.
Benzema! Oh, that was coming.
Any attempts by the visitors to play out from the back were closed down quickly and with purpose. Zidane's troops won the match 2-0 without suspended talisman Cristiano Ronaldo. Mdudu Ndlovu, SABC News.
And of course, we had to ask that question. Is this an end? Is this an end to the Barcelona era? You've been tweeting us on this particular question throughout the day. And a couple of tweets have come in already. And the first one that we're going to bring to you now is of Samuel Eto'o looking slightly befuddled and puzzled. This is Buhle Mafani saying, 2 games beaten by Real Madrid. You already think it's the end of Barcelona's era? Haibo, the season is only starting, guys. So he's telling us to relax. It's not over yet. And we've got another one coming out of Bonga Recession saying every team has a cycle of success and it does come to an end. AC Milan in 2007 in March, Manchester United 1999 to 2011. It happens to the best. And here's my favorite tweet for this in terms of a response to this particular question. Gerard Piqué, head in hands, and he's upset. He says they must live with this defeat and accept that Madrid are better than us. This is Gerard Piqué. In the 9 years I've been here, he said, it's the first time I feel inferior to Madrid. Now, if there ever was a response that's telling, that was it. Moving on to other news, but staying with soccer, the opening Absa Premiership fixture on Friday night between league defending champions Bidvest Wits and Cape Town City will pit a master against his student. Wits coach Gavin Hunt will be coming up against Benny McCarthy, the man he gave his professional debut to at 7 Stars way back in 1995. Now, the two sides were separated by just 5 points at the end of last season, with the Clever Boys being crowned champions and City finishing third in their maiden season.
Both Wits and Cape Town City managed to advance to the semi-finals of the MTN 8 competition last weekend. City is one of the few sides that managed to beat Wits at their home ground last season, getting 4 out of a possible 6 points from the defending champions. In the first round, Wits lost 3-2, with the other match ending in a stalemate in Cape Town. Under newly appointed coach McCarthy, Hunt is expecting another tough battle this season.
I know him very well, the boy. I mean, you know, I had 2-3 years with him as a kid. So, I mean, as a player, what he's achieved is phenomenal. But as a coach, as you know, you start from the bottom again. So, let's see how he does after a couple of games, and then we can judge from there. But he's enthusiastic, got good knowledge of the game, and I wish him well. So.
Unfortunately, Hunt will not be on the bench on Friday after receiving a red card in the MTN 8 quarter-final clash against Golden Arrows.
From our point of view, everything remains the same. Our planning and preparation is done during the week, certainly not obviously during the 90 minutes of the game. Yeah, there might be little tweaks and little bits and bobs to do, but it's certainly done, planning and preparation, and to be carried out on game day. So I'll be there, obviously without Gavin, but everything will be in place and we'll continue as normal.
Wits are looking for a positive start in their quest to defend their league crown. Their high-profile signing, Stephen Pinar, is aiming to make a big contribution.
Yeah, obviously I'm looking forward to play against him as a coach, not as a player. Obviously for us the most important thing is to win the game. It's not going to be easy, but I think all the guys are ready for Friday. It's the first game. You want to start the league good. So for us, there's going to be a lot of pressure as well, defending the league.
The two clubs will meet again in the two-legged MTN 8 semi-finals, having drawn each other on Sunday. Sfeso Ramara, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, staying with football news, Bafana head coach Stuart Baxter has handed over the reins to Thabo Sinong, his assistant coach, to go to Zambia with the squad to make sure that the second leg of the 2018 African Nations Championship qualifier, or CHAN, they fare better in that than they did the last time out here. Bafana will be facing Zambia out in Ndola on Saturday in an encounter they really need to win after their 2-2 draw in East London last weekend. Assistant coach Sinong will be leading the team to Zambia. He's accompanied by a former Bafana legend, Quinton Fortune, who is joining the team as a member of the SAFA technical team. Baxter will remain behind to make sure that he can focus on that upcoming crucial back-to-back FIFA World Cup qualifier against Cabo Verde. The first match against Cabo Verde takes place on the 1st of September. And the return fixture happens 4 days later here in Durban at the Moses Mabhida Stadium. All this as Ajax Cape Town defender Roscoe Peterson becomes the latest player to join the Bafana camp. With his arrival, the number is now 20 of the players who are now on national duty. This after 10 players had been withdrawn by PSL clubs ahead of the start of the season. The squad departed for Zambia today at 10:20. Now, the Griquas are brimming with confidence after 2 massive Currie Cup wins after 4 days. After 3 straight defeats in this year's major domestic rugby competition, the Kimberley-based side beat Western Province last Wednesday and then went on to defeat the Cheetahs in Bloemfontein on Saturday. This weekend, they're up against the Pumas at home in Kimberley.
It was not the ideal start to the season, but 3 successive defeats were followed by 2 victories, and the Griquas are now third on the log.
I think no one gave us a chance after a lot of people wrote us off after the Sharks loss in Durban. The guys really came back, beating Western Province on the Wednesday and beating the Cheetahs then on the Saturday. So I think the Western Province win gave the guys a lot of belief, and it was a brilliant performance in Bloemfontein after a very tough week to get that performance in Bloem.
Those two back-to-back victories have done wonders for the confidence and the mood in the camp.
The winning spirit is nice because if you win, your team is always on a high and the guys enjoy the practice, so practice makes perfect.
6 players are still nursing injuries and hope to be back in action soon. This will be the Griquas testing ground on Sunday. Should they reign victorious, they might climb the log sheet a little higher. Sunday's match kicks off at 2:30 p.m. in the Diamond City. Reginald Vidboy, SABC News, Kimberley.
Now, as I say goodbye to you here on Newsroom, we'll be back tomorrow morning. Just need to let you know and remind you, just a little while ago, President Jacob Zuma gave a keynote address at the launch of the new Development Bank in Sandton. Let's go back there live to take you through more of the proceedings.
Due to the cold weather, some tea has been prepared for us, and so you're all invited to join us in refreshments. Again, our staff will guide you to the exact venue. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you to all our distinguished speakers. If we could allow the presidents to leave, and then we will depart to the refreshment venue. Thank you. Thank you.
Your evening well informed with Primetime News.
Thanks for tuning in. You're watching SABC News Prime. The burning land reform issue was also a point of discussion on the first day.
If you do not have a skills revolution, you will run into the kind of problems that we're having at the moment.
We funded about 466,000 students.